In this lecture for JOMC 161, we're talking about website accessibility and usability. One of the first things that you want to do when thinking about accessibility and usability is do an analysis of the website that you're looking at. You want to decide why the website exists, and this is something you really should even be doing before you build the website. Why are you building the website? Why is your website going to exist? What kind of service or products or what is it going to provide to people? Because users on the web are looking for something, whether it's entertainment, a product, some sort of service. They're looking for something, and so your website needs to provide information specific to what it is you're providing your users. You need to have goals for your website. Generic goals might include things like general types of website. Are you selling a product? Does your website provide a place for people to post opinions? Or does your website provide humor? Does your website provide information about a service that you're selling or marketing? And then specific goals, exactly what type of content is your website going to have? What type of traffic is your website going to need to have? Where's that traffic going to route? How's it going to flow through your website? And you would typically do a SWOT analysis to help you determine, what the strengths and weaknesses are in the area that you're building a site. One of the biggest things you would want to do in order to determine some of this is surf the web. Look at what other people are doing. Look at what the trends are in the industry. I always like to look at what the predictions are for trends. IT World or It World. They have predictions for the 2016-2017 web trends. And looking through some of these, I'll just kind of quickly run through the obvious ones. Originality. Of course, originality is going to be a trend. It shouldn't really be a trend. It should just be something that happens anyway. But more specifically, they're talking about renewed emphasis on originality. Flat design. Flat design's been a trend for a few years now. And I think they're talking about the evolution of flat design. So how's it going to change in the next couple of years? It's hard to say exactly. Micro experiences. Miniature apps within websites or within apps, phone apps, mobile apps. Shorter pages. So reduction in page height is hopefully going to be a trend. I do see a little bit of a trend lately towards longer pages and fewer pages, so more content on single pages and fewer pages on the entire site. So I'm not sure how this reduction in page height is really going to come to fruition, but we'll see. With the introduction also of Google fonts and CSS embedding of fonts, there's a renewed focus on typography recently. And so, using fonts, it used to be back in the good old days of web development, you had a few choices for fonts and that was it. If you wanted a fun, fancy, or a special font, you had to make it a graphic. Now with the use of Google fonts and embedded fonts in the CSS, you can use just about any font you want. And brings a whole new level of typography use into web design. That's all they have on the post, but if you do a little Google searching, you can probably find other websites that have website trend predictions or simply website trends that have been happening in the last few years. Do your research on who your audience is going to be. Know who your audience is. Take a look at who's using your website, what the demographics are, what the psychographics are, and then you can figure out what they're looking for and how they're going to look for it. That can help you immensely with how you organize your site and how you display the content on your site. Also, thinking about usability, you want to think about design of the site. Of course, organizing the content is one thing, but organizing the page layout and the interface is another thing. We know from reading research or research into reading that users read in an F-shaped pattern, which means typically they're not going to read your text. So what that means for you is you need to make text scannable, you need to provide graphics, and you need to provide some element of design to push or pull or lead the user through the design. Another good source for design and usability is a book by Steve Krug called Don't Make Me Think, and there's a third version of this out now. It talks a lot about scanning and how to make users intuitively understand how your website works without having to actually explain it to them. So things like making things very obvious, taking away the question marks, omitting unnecessary text or words, using navigational clues, conventions, and I'll say this again later, but conventions are your friends. Things like breadcrumbs and site IDs and page sections. Every user is familiar with what those are, and if you use them, they're going to automatically know what they do. Steve talks about the trunk test in his book, and that's sort of user testing that's sort of like being dumped into a trunk of a car, driven around for a while, and then let out somewhere in the middle of town, and your goal is to figure out where you are, how you got there, and how to get back to where you started. That's kind of what you do with users on a trunk test on a website is you drop them in on a page. Their goal is then to find out where they are on the site, how they got there, and then how to get back to the home page. You can use focus group testing, which is bringing a group of people together to look at a site and discuss their feelings toward the site, how it makes them feel, how it makes them, what their reactions are to the design and the layout and the look of the site. You can use usability testing, which is usually single user testing, which you, similar to the trunk test, you bring them to a site, you give them a goal, something they need to accomplish, and then you time it, or you look at where they try to go to accomplish that goal, if they're going to the right pages or if they're going to the right sections of the page. And then I've got a link to this whole list of 43 things you should not do. Definitely you want to check that out when you get a few minutes, because there's some very interesting things. It's beyond just do not use Comic Sans, which, by the way, do not use Comic Sans. That goes for print design also. So let's talk a little bit more about accessibility. What is accessibility, and really, what is Section 508? Because Section 508 is what people hear a lot of the time when they hear people talking about accessibility. It's what it is an amendment to the Rehabilitation Act that they enacted in 1998, and it basically defines accessibility standards for any information technology. So that's more than just websites. It includes anything digital, really, DVDs, website, anything on the web. And it's basically the standards for how people with disabilities can access the same amount of content and the same information as anybody else. It's becoming more enforced. It will become more enforced as time goes on. We've already seen a number of case studies where universities have gotten in trouble, major corporations have been in trouble because their websites haven't been up to accessibility standards. And the World Wide Web Consortium, the W3C, supports accessibility and in fact is doing a major part of the enforcement of it, creating guidelines and standards for the web to make things accessible, and doing a lot of outreach and making sure people know what it means and understand how to accomplish accessible websites. The W3C also serves as a discussion forum for standards about the web in general. So some case studies that you can look up. Ramada Inn and Priceline both had issues with their websites being inaccessible in 2004. In 2006, there was a case against Target. Had to do with their gift cards not being accessible. You couldn't use gift cards on the website if you were blind. I think it had to do with visual accessibility. Penn State in 2010 was also subject to an accessibility lawsuit with regard to their library and their course management software, those software being inaccessible to visually impaired users. Stevie Wonder has expressed his opinion about accessibility to visually impaired users, particularly with the introduction of touchscreens. Primary mobile devices, cell phones and iPads and that sort of thing are relatively inaccessible because unless you can see the screen to know where to touch it, it's really difficult to actually be able to use it. So there's some discussion growing there as to how to make touchscreen technology accessible to visually impaired users. In 2011, Stephen Fry, I don't know if many of you know who Stephen Fry is, but he backed a project called Fix the Web, where people basically are allowed to report websites that are inaccessible, and then Fix the Web sort of goes after them, warns them that they need to make these changes and make their websites accessible. And according to their website, last I checked, they had over 1,000 volunteers and over 3,000 sites reported. And of those sites, I'm sure these numbers have changed significantly in the last year or so, but 148 of the websites have been fixed. They also provide a toolbar for disabled people to report websites that have issues. And just as sort of a final word, let's talk really quickly. There's some things you can do to maintain accessibility and usability on your website. To be compliant with accessibility standards, all images and animations should have attributes called alternate. And we've talked about this a little bit already, using alt attributes on images, required for validation anyway. But the descriptive function of those is very important to visually impaired users. Any multimedia should have captions or transcripts, descriptions of the content of the video if it's a video. Links should use text that makes sense when read out of context. And one of the most glaring examples of a bad hypertext link bad for accessibility would be one that just says simply click here, because what does that do? Sometimes that even confuses people who can see. Visual cues such as underlines, identifying links, that's a big deal. The Web Developers Network at UNL here had a discussion a while back about how to use the underlines, how to underline nicely, because sometimes underlines don't look very good and people get rid of them because they're sort of annoying, but they're visual clues to links, and so those are very useful for web users with disabilities in some cases. Organizing pages using headings and lists in a consistent structure, things like simple as using the CSS for layout and style. That's a big deal for accessibility as well. Using long description attributes to summarize the use of graphs or charts on your page. Plugins, applets, scripts, anything like that don't necessarily run in some accessible applications, such as JAWS, a screen reader for blind users. So providing alternative content for those is important. This is one of the big reasons that Flash is not really as popular, or is really dying, because there is no good way to make Flash accessible. And really one of the biggest things you can do, and one of the first things you should do to make your website compliant and accessible, is validate your work. Validate your HTML, validate your CSS. And I have a link here to an overview of these tips. But these are the basic things you can do to maintain compliance to accessibility on your website. And that's it as far as this lecture goes. Thanks for watching.